Hello and welcome to the very first episode of my show. I'm your host, Emilio Pons. I'm a German-Mexican opera singer and former attorney at law. The purpose of this show is to provide a conservative perspective from somebody who works within the arts about what is going on, not just in the world of arts, but in the world of international politics as well. Today, I have the huge honor of welcoming one of the people that I admire the most in the world, one of the leading intellectuals of the conservative movement in the United States, Heather Mac Donald.
Thank you so much, Emilio.
I really cannot tell you enough how thankful I am to you and how much I continue to be in awe of everything that you do and the wealth of experience and knowledge that you have. For the few of you who don't know Heather, I will read a very succinct biography from her latest book, When Race Trumps Merit. Heather Mac Donald is a Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, a contributed editor at City Journal, and the 2005 recipient of the Bradley Prize. Mac Donald received a BA from Yale University, an MA from Cambridge University, and a JD from Stanford University. Her work has covered a range of topics from higher education and immigration to policing and race relations. Mac Donald's writing has appeared in publications such as the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and the New York Times. She's the author of several critically acclaimed books, including The Diversity Delusion and the New York Times bestseller, The War on Cops. Again, thank you so much for joining us.
Let me thank you, Emilio. Let me just say for your viewers that discovering your heaven here, this extraordinary townhouse that is the center of so much creativity, musical creativity, was something I never would have believed I would encounter, especially in New York City.
Right.
So to have the Schubertiades, the wonderful music making in the 19th century around Franz Schubert, resurrected in this house, and finding also, I have to say, the political openness and lack of standard thinking within the arts community of the people you surround yourself with was like a dream come true. So it's been an enrichment for my life to have encountered you.
Thank you. I'm very, very pleased. And I can only, again, emphasize the fact that I'm absolutely overwhelmed. As you know, I came here from Germany in September of 2021 with the aim of recreating the academy that I had in Germany. But then once I got here, I realized that there was actually a need for conservative voices to openly not just engage in the creation of art, but also in engaging in healthy political debate about current affairs and what was going on in this country, particularly as we headed to the election of 2024. And then the other thing that I also realized is that, unfortunately, in the United States, in spite of the fact that there are millions of people like myself who are expats from Latin America, the representation, to borrow a term from the left, on media is actually quite pathetic. If you knew nothing else about the Latin American community in the US, you would think that all we are capable of consuming is garbage content of the type that Telemundo offers, telenovelas and that kind of thing. And I wanted to prove to the rest of the world that there is also Latin American intelligentsia of sorts here in the United States, and that we are also conservative. We are not part of the state clients of the Democrat Party. And we have a lot to contribute also culturally. So part of the reason why we are doing this show now is to provide that perspective. So for today's inaugural episode, I have four topics that I want to talk about. And this might mean that we will extend our conversation a little bit longer than other future episodes, and we will then divide this into 3 or 4 episodes. The topics that I wanted to talk about today are what is it that conservatives defeated in 2024? How is it that we got where we are? Then how is it that the status quo of pre-2024, pre-2024 November 5 affected the arts, and finally, what we can do about changing the status quo and revitalizing the art scene in the United States. What do you think about this structure?
I think it sounds great. Let's go.
Okay, good. So without further ado, I just want to share with you my perspective as a foreigner living in New York who doesn't have a direct dog in the race, but is nevertheless impacted by what happens in the United States. Because like we say in Mexico, when the United States sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. So this is my analysis. I'll be a little bit long-winded here. I have like 2 pages of analysis, and then you'll tell me what you think, whether I missed something, whether you disagree with part of it or not. So, and after that, we'll dive really into the interview with you. So, in my view, these are the main things that the conservatives defeated or voted against in 2024. The left's attitude towards freedom of speech, the betrayal and the defrauding of the American electorate, the erosion of the rule of law, the demonization of the West, the gaslighting and the intellectual dishonesty of the left, the war on merit, the assault on the weakest members of society, and the left's penchant for virtue signaling and selective outrage, and finally, the repudiation of woke presentism. So I'm going to expand a little bit on one of these issues. So the war on freedom of speech of the left is very, very clear to anybody who has not been living under a rock. We had social media companies heavily censoring conservatives. We had a distortion and weaponization of language for political gain. We had an authoritarian and totalitarian woke movement, which through DEI sought to purge people from the workforce, prosecute them for wrongthink, and also engaged in cancel culture, deplatforming, something that you experienced firsthand, shadow banning, etc. And we, of course, then had a spread of the DEI industry, which is not something that creates any value, actually, and it's just feeding the gigantic bureaucracy, not just of government, but also educational and artistic institutions. Then we have the betrayal of the American electorate to the extent that the last administration clearly prioritized illegal immigration in the U.S. And the use or misuse, rather, of American taxpayers' funds for funding foreign wars and also squandering taxpayers' resources in foreign aid without first taking care of American citizens. And then you also have this betrayal manifest itself through the nefarious marriage between the state and the media, which served as nothing other than a propaganda machine for the state. We have the erosion of the rule of law to the extent that there was a weaponization of the justice system, particularly against President Trump. We had unethical and even criminal behavior by members of the Biden family. The war on cops, which is the subject of one of your books, and also the glorification of common criminals like George Floyd in the name of social justice, and the normalization of antisocial and violent behavior. I mean, the type of smash and grab episodes that we've seen in the United States were unfathomable even a decade ago. We have the demonization of the West, particularly of its former colonial powers, from a purely one-sided perspective, never ever acknowledging the good things that the West did for the world, amongst other things, for example, being the first countries on earth to outlaw slavery. The ridiculous notion of cultural appropriation and the misplaced self-incrimination and undue credit to people who were not due anything, such as entertaining the concept of reparations in California, a state that never had slaves and therefore had no victims of slavery. Then the gaslighting and the intellectual dishonesty of the media, but also of the press secretary, for example, of the White House, who insisted that Biden was sharp as a knife the entire time. The war on merit, obviously, this hostile takeover of the educational system by the Marxists who view the world exclusively in terms of power structures and power struggles, and the woke concept of equity, which is nothing other than socially engineered equality of outcomes rather than the equality of opportunity and, above all, equality under the law that we had for decades, and that worked absolutely fine. The assault of the weakest members of society, whether it be through the invasion by biological men of women's sports and women's private spheres, the sexualization and mutilation even of children in the name of transgender rights, and the blatant disregard of life by framing abortion exclusively as a woman's right issue and a healthcare issue, always using extreme cases as justification, so rape and incest, without ever taking into consideration parental rights of fathers who were not abusive and actually wanted the children to be born, or the overwhelming of cases in which women take abortion to be synonymous with contraception. The virtue signaling and selective outrage, all these campaigns as, I'm with her, decolonize XYZ, topple white supremacy and uplift BIPOC and LGBTQ, AWP, whatever, this letter soup from the comfort of a luxury home while operating a computer or a phone that actually require the type of slavery that they are supposedly against. And then all these grand statements about, believe all women, but just let's not believe the Jewish women who were raped by Hamas on October 7th, renamed the institutions of every, named after every single person who committed even the slightest peccadillo when it comes to race relations, but of course, selectively, because we don't want to address, for example, the womanizing nature of Martin Luther King or the anti-Asian bias of somebody like Leland Stanford, right? And finally, the repudiation of woke presentism, presentism being the judging of historical figures by today's standards, which led to the toppling of statues in the months following the murder of George Floyd and the attempt by the left to destroy our past and our history. Did I miss something?
No, absolutely. And one could say, wow, that's very totalizing, as we used to say in academia. You've covered all grounds, and there's always a risk of reading in your own priorities into some external event.
Right.
Things that I think people should have voted for, against, or for, that's what they did. On the other hand, to back up your very, very large list of issues is the fact that this unbelievable battery of executive orders that Trump has been signing in the week since he took his oath of office that shows a military capacity to wage war against an enemy of Western civilization sort of touches on everything you've said, which would suggest that one way or another, that multiplicity of issues was all involved, because he has responded on immigration, on civilization, on the race hustle, on the denigration of Western civilization. One way or another, everything's in there. And I guess to boil it down, one could say that the fundamental sickness of European Anglo-American civilization right now, the thing that I struggle to understand where its origins are, is this profound self-hatred and suicide that we seem bent on both discrediting the unique accomplishments of the West. Obviously, there have been civilizations that achieved extraordinary grandeur of expression, of beauty, of architecture, of mastery, of a certain degree of understanding of nature, but nothing, frankly, came close to the West in terms of the passion for knowledge, the passion for systematizing knowledge, the creation of liberating ideas of limited constitutional government. As you say, slavery was ended exclusively because of the involvement first of Britain and then the United States. Britain had to spend 13% of its naval resources blockading the coast of West Africa in the 1860s to try and stop the slave trade. It had to occupy Lagos in what is now Nigeria in order to decouple the slave trade there. No other civilization ever had a problem with slavery. Same with equal rights. Everything that the left fights in the name of today, and I say in the name of because they're not truly sincere, is every single concept is a Western concept exclusively. Tolerance, secularism, separation of church and state, nowhere else but the West did that come from. So there is something that is going on in Western civilization now that is also unique. China is not calling on itself for reparations. Africa is not calling on itself for reparations.
The Middle East for sure not.
India is not. Middle East for sure not. Why the West? What is driving this? So I think that there's a reaction against that, whether people understand how profound and unmerited this self-hatred is, that they're not going to take it anymore. And I also hope, frankly, that it represents a rising up of the white male who is now the target of opprobrium by every elite institution and saying, we're not to blame, that we are the last to be hired, the first fired. If you're going to want to get into medical school or law school or get a medical license, if you're a white male, the system is stacked against you. If you're in the intersectional categories, you have a much greater chance. The standards are being lowered on your behalf across the board. People are reacting against that. The one thing you didn't touch on, obviously, was the economy. I think as just an empirical matter, the aftermath of the high inflation still made a difference to people. How much Trump can do about that, I don't know. But I think that the reaction has been very broad, and you would think that the breadth of that reaction would be such that it would make it impossible to respond to. Yet what I have been so struck by in this week, is it only a week? It's not even a week. Somebody within the Trump circle has, as I say, a Napoleonic capacity to wage war and knows where the bodies are buried. The detail of these executive orders with regards to both the Code of Federal Regulations, where in the code is the racial preference regime lodged, where in the statutes is it lodged, it's quite amazing.
So the reason why I didn't talk about the economy is, frankly, because the economy has been terrible across the board, not just in the United States, but in the entire world as a result of the draconian measures that were taken in early 2020 to stop the spread within 2 weeks, right? And that ended up destroying the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people all over the world for over 2.5 years. But also because I don't think that when it comes to the 2024 election, the saying, is the economy stupid, really holds true anymore. I think that people finally woke up to the fact that we are in a cultural war between the very evil forces of the left, which has completely hijacked the Democrat Party, even though there are many Democrat voters who are not aware of these and still live under the delusion that the Democrat Party of today somehow resembles that of the Democrat Party of Bill Clinton. But also because, as I said, I don't think that the inflation that we are having here in the United States and that certainly got a lot worse during Biden's administration, was an exclusive phenomenon to the United States. So that's why I didn't include it as part of my analysis, although it's absolutely true that we are all hurting as a result. So now going on to the next part.
Just because it's not happening only here doesn't mean it wasn't an influence. It still could be.
Of course.
So I just think, who knows, polls are how much to believe in. I just think it's probably is the case that for a lot of people that still was an issue, which does not undercut the importance of the culture issues, and one hopes of a growing self-awareness of what is at stake. So
correct.
Yeah, for the record.
Yeah, and I think also that for a lot of people, the issue became, how does it help me that Waltz was putting tampons in boys' locker rooms and bathrooms, to ameliorate my situation when I can't afford groceries. So I think that was just the one element that made things worse.